I remember reading it and feeling like greedy for it as I was reading it. It's one of those things where it was speaking to me in a way that was initially subconscious. Like, I didn't really know what was appealing to me about it, and it took me quite a while to figure out what it was. But I knew it was something that I wanted to deal with, and it seemed to be a perfect story for a short film. I really did not ever think of making it into a feature.
I was always a fan of Julian's because I saw Thief when I was at AFI, and I was a big fan of it. It was like the first, for me personally, it was the first film, I always say this, that I saw that from that class that year that I was like, oh shit, this is a movie. Elevated, it felt high concept, but it also like had a very sophisticated perspective and felt like art house, which is the kind of stuff that I'm into. And so like I was like, man, I would love to work with this guy one day. Cut to like 5 years later, me and Julian meet. It was right on the heels of the 2016 election, and we were both like really disillusioned. And we were just, the conversation, we always talk about this, the thesis of the conversation was, how do we make our art our activism? And that was kind of like the start of a conversation that just led to us talking more, just having conversations about, things we're into, what appealed to us. Conversations you're having when you're thinking about working with somebody.
Part of our conversation was that we were angry that people were shocked at the outcome of the election. And we wanted to kind of get into that. And there were so many different intersecting issues that seemed like we wanted to talk about them. And we just kind of wanted to pour all those things into this very simple framework of the story.
Initially, we talked about changing the main character to a black man. Same age, but just changing the race of the character. And then ultimately, Julian suggested that we change it to a middle-aged black woman.
Making that change would give us access to trying to describe these dynamics that we were seeing.
Out here, things are a little different. Most folks, they handle this sort of thing amongst themselves.
I guess I'm not most folks.
There's a lot of women in my life, a lot of strong women. And I've always wanted to I've always been a big fan of Westerns, and I've always wanted to kind of make a movie where my mom was kind of like an influential character. And so, yeah, those things spoke to me, and that's kind of how I got involved in it.
Julian had sent me a couple pieces of material, and I thought he was such a great writer. When Julian sent me God's Country, I immediately fell in love with it. It didn't feel like a choice, it was like a compulsive reaction that I had to do whatever I could to make the film. I thought every word was so delicious, but for me it was the church scene that really resonated.
Is that your mother?
Yes. Yeah, what of it?
My mother was an organist.
This idea of people with really different beliefs missing each other by a moment or a breath was something I really connected with. So I started kind of this interview process of dining with Julian across Los Feliz to sort of see if we connected and we could make it happen.
I mean, I will say that I'm glad it took 12 years after AFI for us to make this movie. In a lot of ways, it's the movie I kind of always wanted to make, but I would not have been ready to do it earlier. With this amount of money, with this amount of time, you kind of ripen a little bit, and I needed to experience things working in ways that I didn't like to influence the process on something that I knew I was going to care about a lot.
Going into the film, I knew that one of the biggest challenges was going to be creating balance and contrast with these beautiful, sweeping landscapes, these gigantic setups that Will shot so beautifully, and I wanted to be able to stand beside those really big moments in the film with the more intimate, quiet moments in the film and stand proudly beside those shots with our sets.
Justin was hired before remote work and the pandemic, all very commonplace now, but at the time it felt very strange to hire.
Why use this editor in a different state?
Yes,
and why use an editor who has a full-time job and kids in another state who doesn't seem to want to be in the film industry? That was the very understandable argument that was being made to me, and I was like, because you will get incredible work, and that's what are we doing otherwise? The plan that we proposed was to edit from 4 to 7 a.m. LA time. 4 to 7 a.m. Every weekday, and we would do it remotely.
I
By
would
the way,
also say about the early editing, you end up being very sharp at 5 a.m. every day. If you wake up, you're very sharp for that first 3 hours. After that, I mean, I was horrible. I'm sure I was stealing
job
time
suffered.
for my day job.
Yeah, your
I
job
mean,
suffered, but who
but and like the other thing that ends up happening is there's a lot of conversations that aren't between that time. There are a lot of things that happen all the time that you're going to be working with them, even though it's not like the scheduled edit session.
my schedule was I would wake up at 3:55. I'd be sitting in my office at 4, and then we'd edit from 4 to 7. Then I'd walk the dog, and while I was walking the dog, I would have all kinds of ideas, you know. And then I could, because we were sharing the project, I could go and like look at the footage and review it on my own and think about it and like noodle around with it. And he could do the same. And then the next day we'd come in with some new stuff.
Why do you care so much? Go back to sleep.
Why don't you come inside? We can work it out. What's the matter? Hey, where are you going?
It is very important for you to have people with you on your first feature that are on the filmmaking journey with you. And not just the filmmaking journey, but like the life journey with you. People that you know you can depend on and you just never question it.